The HOA president stepped out of the new guard booth in my front yard and ordered me to stop photographing it. The cedar-sided box stood on a fresh concrete pad 23 feet from my porch, its barrier arm stretched across the gravel entrance I had used for 19 years. Wet cement still smelled sharp in the morning heat. She tapped the HOA logo on the door and said, "This entrance belongs to the community now." I didn't argue. I photographed the footings, the utility trench, and the orange stake the crew had snapped off beside my mailbox. Then I asked to see the approved site plan. She smiled and told the contractor to keep working. 10 minutes later, the county inspector I had called from my porch turned into the driveway. Meredith Sloan watched him park beside my pickup, but her expression never changed. She stood with one hand on the barrier controls while two installers pulled cable through the open trench. The inspector unfolded the permit, drawing across his hood, and looked from the printed setback line to the booth. His tape measure stopped well inside the frontage described in my deed. He did not pretend that his badge let him decide ownership. He said he could address the permit and setback, while a survey and the recorded property documents would have to establish the boundary. That distinction did not help Meredith. The booth was only 14 feet from the county road right-of-way. The approved drawing required 40 feet. Its concrete pad, electrical trench, and swinging arm were all outside the construction area shown in the county file. The inspector ordered the installers to stop. One killed the saw, the other left a coil of black cable beside the trench. I walked the site slowly, keeping my phone low enough to capture the wet concrete, tire impressions, cut irrigation tubing, and the broken stake before anyone could move them. Meredith told the contractor the delay would be resolved by afternoon. He glanced at her, then at the stop work notice being fastened to the booth door. He looked less certain than she did. I photographed the notice and the plan displayed behind the booth window. That was when the drawing number caught my attention. The county inspector's approved sheet was labeled C104. The copy posted by the HOA was C109. One digit had changed, along with the booth's location. The inspector checked his electronic permit record. C109 was not listed among the approved documents. He photographed the posted copy and instructed the crew not to remove it. Meredith said it was merely a field update, but there was no county approval stamp in its title block. Before leaving, the contractor quietly handed me the broken half of the orange stake. A handwritten notation was still visible beneath the dirt. Caldwell sighed. By noon, the machinery was silent and the barrier arm remained raised. The booth was still standing in my yard, but the HOA's claim of authority had acquired its first crack. Someone had created C109, moved the structure away from its approved location, and marked my side of the line before the first bucket of soil was lifted. What I did not yet know was whether Meredith had relied on a bad drawing or ordered it. I carried the broken stake into my workshop and set it on the bench beside a row of unfinished cabinet doors. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I was 52 then, and I made custom cabinets in a detached shop behind the farmhouse. The property covered 2.8 acres, but the part that mattered that morning was the narrow strip between my porch and the county road, the same ground Meredith had treated as spare space for her gatehouse. I had bought the place 19 years earlier, when Briar Glen was still pasture and scrub oak beyond my eastern fence. The house needed a roof, the shop had dirt floors, and the driveway was little more than 2 gravel tracks. My father helped me rebuild all 3. His hands had set the mailbox post Meredith's crew had nearly pulled from the ground. Briar Glen had its own platted entrance farther east, where a landscaped boulevard met the county road beside 2 stone pillars. My driveway never connected to that boulevard. A drainage swale and a strip of HOA common land separated them, which made the new barrier arm look even more deliberate. The driveway was not decorative. Lumber trucks used it to reach the workshop. Customers used it to collect finished pieces. It was also the only practical route for an ambulance or fire engine to reach the back of the house. With the barrier arm across its 12-foot width, every arrival depended on a guard employed by an association I had never joined. Briar Glen had used that route before, but not in the way Meredith claimed. In 2014, while the subdivision roads were under construction, Its developer asked for temporary access across the eastern edge of my drive. I agreed because their main entrance was still mud. The written license allowed construction vehicles for 18 months. It prohibited permanent improvements and ended in 2016. I had kept the signed copy in a metal file cabinet with my deed and closing papers. The next afternoon, an HOA courier delivered a letter bearing Meredith's signature. It described my driveway as Briar Glen's established community entrance and claimed that years of visible use had created a continuing access right. The letter demanded that I stop interfering with security operations and warned that the association would seek reimbursement for delays. It did not mention the expired license. It did not mention C-109. It did not explain how a right to drive construction trucks had supposedly become a right to pour concrete in my lawn. I scanned the letter, the license, and my deed before sending them to a title company. Then I emailed Meredith a short response stating that I disputed every claim of permanent access and did not consent to anyone occupying my property. I copied the county inspector so there would be a dated record. The stop work notice kept the barrier raised, but the HOA found another way to assert control. 2 guards began standing beside the booth in matching gray shirts. They wrote down license plates and asked customers where they were going. On Thursday, a lumber driver saw them waving residents toward my drive and assumed the road was closed to deliveries. He turned around with a load of maple plywood I needed for a restaurant order. That delay cost me most of a workday. More importantly, it showed that the booth could damage my business even while it was officially inactive. I saved the delivery cancellation, photographed the guards from my porch, and downloaded the security camera footage before its automatic archive could overwrite anything. 3 days later, the title examiner called. She had traced my parcel and the neighboring HOA common land through the recorded chain. She found the 2014 license and its termination, but no deed, plat notation, declaration, or recorded easement granting Briar Glen permanent use of my driveway. Her written report included one careful warning. Title records could establish the documentary rights, but they would not show exactly where the newly poured foundation sat on the ground. For that, I needed a licensed surveyor to recover the monuments, measure the improvements, and compare both site plans with the recorded boundary. I looked through the workshop window at the silent cedar booth. Meredith had given me a letter claiming the entrance belonged to her community. The records had given me something stronger, proof that no permanent access right had ever been recorded. Now I needed to find out how far they had crossed the line. Alicia Park arrived the following Tuesday in a white survey truck with 2 tripods strapped behind the cab. She was 41, deliberate in the way she spoke, and unimpressed by the booth's polished cedar siding. Before unloading anything, she asked me for every document I had: my deed, the 2014 license, the title report, Briar Glen's recorded plat, and both site drawings. She studied them at my kitchen table and marked 3 deed calls in pencil. Then she explained what her work could and could not prove. A certified survey could locate the described boundary and the new improvements on the ground. It could not, by itself, decide every legal argument the HOA might raise about use. That question belonged with the recorded documents and, if necessary, a court. Outside, Alicia began at the county road, checking the right-of-way record against a control point across the pavement. Meredith appeared before the first hour was over. "Your old deed doesn't override our approved entrance," she called. Alicia did not answer. She kept measuring. The eastern corner monument took longer to find. The recorded plat described an iron pin near the mouth of my driveway, but decorative riverstone had been spread over the area when Briar Glen landscaped its entrance. Alicia used a magnetic locator, swept the edge of the stones twice, and heard a sharp rising tone. 6 inches below the surface, she uncovered an iron pin with an aged brass cap that matched the monument reference in the earlier survey record. From there, the geometry became visible. Alicia ran a bright line between the recovered corners, checked the deed distances, and placed red stakes beside the booth's foundation. The entire cedar structure stood 21 feet inside my parcel. The concrete pad crossed the line with it. The barrier arm swung over the full 12-foot width of my driveway. The setback problem was separate and just as clear. Alicia measured from the county road right-of-way rather than the pavement edge. The nearest footing sat 14 feet from that line. C-104 showed a minimum distance of 40 feet and placed the booth beyond the drainage swale on HOA common land. Her assistant traced the utility cut toward a temporary power connection. 68 feet of trench crossed my property, severing an irrigation branch along the way. Meredith stepped closer when Alicia drove the final red stake. "That line has never been there before," she said. I held up the photographs I had taken during the excavation. The broken orange stake had occupied nearly the same spot. Meredith looked at it, then turned away without responding. Alicia spent 2 more days checking her fieldwork. Her certified improvement survey showed the deed line, recovered monuments, road right-of-way, booth, barrier sweep, trench, irrigation damage, and every relevant distance. She attached photographs and cited the recorded sources she had used. With her preliminary measurements in hand, I visited the county permit office and requested a certified copy of the entire project file. The clerk produced the application, review notes, approved site plan, drainage comments, and inspection record. Every approval referred to sheet C-104. It placed the booth 40 feet east of where Meredith had built it, entirely within Briar Glen's common parcel. There was no C-109 in the index, no approval stamp, no revised permit, no record that county reviewers had ever seen it. I placed the posted copy beside C-104 on the records counter. The title blocks looked similar, but C-109 shifted the booth across the drainage swale and onto the western side of the property line. A faint revision note near the bottom read, "Field Stake Adjustment." The clerk certified that it was not part of the county file and gave me a written response to that effect. That evening, I sent the deed, title report, temporary license, certified survey, and both drawings to Jordan Blake, a property attorney recommended by the title examiner. He called before I had finished cleaning sawdust from the shop floor. Jordan said the evidence was strong, but he wanted the construction records preserved before anyone could revise, delete, or lose them. He prepared notices for Meredith, the HOA, its property manager, and the contractor. They were instructed to retain emails, native drawing files, field notes, invoices, photographs, change orders, and communications concerning C-109. The next morning, a courier delivered Jordan's cease and desist letter while the 2 guards were taking their positions beside the booth. It demanded that Briar Glen stop directing traffic across my land, remove its personnel, and propose a supervised removal plan. The letter enclosed Alicia's survey and the county certification. Meredith read the first page without moving. Then she folded the survey inward so the red boundary line disappeared and told the guards to remain. Within an hour, residents began receiving a message accusing me of blocking their security improvements. By sunset, 3 HOA vehicles had turned into my driveway beneath the raised barrier. The survey had shown exactly where the line was. Meredith's answer was to send more people across it. The traffic increased the day after Meredith's message. Most drivers were residents following the HOA's directions, not people looking for trouble. They slowed when they saw the survey stakes, then crossed my driveway shoulder to merge back toward Briar Glen. By Friday afternoon, 2 shallow ruts had formed beside the mailbox, and the broken irrigation branch was seeping beneath the gravel. I placed cones around the soft ground without blocking the drive. Meredith sent another notice accusing me of creating a hazard at a community entrance. She copied Briar Glen's residents and warned that I could be held responsible for security delays and additional contractor costs. Jordan advised me to answer with documentation, not anger. I photographed the ruts with a measuring tape, saved the notice, and kept a daily log of every vehicle that entered. My cameras captured the guards arriving at 7 each morning, the property manager handing them updated resident lists, and HOA vehicles directing drivers past the stop work notice. The practical damage accumulated quietly. A customer collecting a walnut dining set waited 20 minutes while a guard questioned her at the booth. A delivery truck dropped one wheel into the softened shoulder and pulled out a section of gravel. Water from the severed irrigation line began pooling near the mailbox, carrying red clay toward the county ditch. I shut down that irrigation zone, but the young maples along the drive started showing curled leaves in the August heat. On Monday, a man named Calvin Ross called my workshop. He owned the company that had poured the pad and installed the booth. Jordan's preservation notice had reached him, and he wanted to make clear that his crew had not selected the location. We met at Jordan's office with Calvin's attorney present. Calvin brought copies of his daily logs, staking photographs, and the change order packet. His original bid matched C-104. It placed the booth east of the drainage swale on Briar Glen's common parcel, exactly where the certified county file showed it. The trouble began when a utility locator marked a stormwater vault and buried electrical lines beneath that approved location. Calvin paused excavation and requested instructions. An engineering estimate placed the cost of relocating the conflicting infrastructure and correcting the drainage approach at approximately $74,000. 2 days later, Calvin received C-109 from Meredith through the HOA property manager. The revised sheet moved the booth west, away from the vault and across the line Alicia later surveyed. Calvin's change order note described the new position and contained a typed statement that adjacent homeowner approval was pending. No one had called me. No one had sent a plan. No one had asked permission. Calvin showed us a photograph taken before excavation. It included the orange stake beside my mailbox with the words Caldwell side written on it. According to his field log, Meredith had walked the site that morning and approved the staking. Calvin said she assured him the HOA had the necessary access rights and that the permit revision would follow. Jordan asked whether Calvin had received any signed authorization from me. He had not. He also had no stamped copy of C-109, only the PDF attached to the property manager's email. That meeting changed the shape of the dispute. A surveying error could have explained a few misplaced feet. It could not explain a new drawing, a known utility conflict, a $74,000 avoidance, and a note admitting that homeowner approval had not yet been obtained. Jordan requested Briar Glen's meeting records. An archived set of minutes from 6 weeks before construction showed that board treasurer Susan Bell had asked for a title review before any entrance work crossed neighboring property. The minutes recorded Meredith's response. Management would verify access before mobilization. No later minutes contained that verification or a board vote approving construction on my parcel. Then Susan forwarded an email she had preserved in her personal board archive. Meredith had written to the property manager after receiving the infrastructure estimate. Place it on the Caldwell side and let the permit revision catch up, the message said. She described the shift as the only way to keep the security project within budget. The wording matched the broken stake on my workbench. I hired a restoration contractor to inspect the site. His estimate totaled $21,900. It covered demolition and removal of the concrete, extraction of the underground cable, repair of the driveway edge and irrigation branch, replacement of contaminated gravel, regrading around the mailbox, and restoration of the grass and maples. The estimate did not include legal fees or the business time I had already lost. Jordan sent Meredith and the board a final proposal. Remove the guards immediately, stop routing vehicles across my land, agree to a supervised removal plan, and fund the documented restoration. The board's attorney rejected it. He maintained that Briar Glen had relied on years of access and warned that the association would defend its community entrance. That evening, another HOA security notice appeared on the booth. My camera recorded the property manager fastening it directly over the county's stop work order before leaving. I removed nothing. I photographed both papers in place and sent the footage to Jordan. By then, the booth was no longer just an object built over a disputed line. We had evidence of the approved location, the altered location, the financial reason for the change, the person who authorized it, and the harm that followed. When voluntary removal failed, Jordan began drafting the complaint. Jordan filed the complaint the following Wednesday. He did not ask the court to decide the case from a single photograph or force an immediate demolition without a hearing. The filing requested a declaration of the parties' rights, removal of the encroaching structures, compensation for documented damage, and an injunction preventing Briar Glen from controlling or routing traffic across my parcel. The exhibits filled 2 binders, my deed and the title report, established the recorded chain. The 2014 license showed that the developer's access had been temporary, limited to construction vehicles, and terminated in 2016. Alicia's survey located the monuments and every improvement. The county file authenticated C-104. My photographs, camera recordings, delivery records, Calvin's logs, and the restoration estimate documented how the booth had been built and what it was costing me. Briar Glen's response avoided the missing permit revision. Its attorney argued that the community had relied on the route for years, that I had tolerated traffic during construction, and that removing the security station would create hardship for residents. The association asked the court to preserve what it called the established access arrangement while the case proceeded. Jordan expected that argument. Permission, he explained, was not the same as permanent ownership. The expired license might prove that the original use began with my consent, but it did not grant a permanent easement, authorize a building, or allow a barrier across my driveway. Whether Briar Glen could prove some other legal right would require evidence. Its own assertions could not supply the missing record. At the initial hearing, the judge kept the relief narrow. She did not order the booth demolished that day. Instead, she prohibited the HOA from energizing it, lowering the barrier arm, stationing guards on my parcel, or directing subdivision traffic through my driveway while discovery continued. A licensed electrician had to disconnect the unfinished power line, and both sides were ordered to preserve the structure and all project records. The next morning, the gray-shirted guards did not appear. For the first time since the booth arrived, a lumber truck reached my shop without being questioned. The cedar box still blocked part of my view from the porch, but it no longer functioned as an HOA checkpoint. Discovery began with the native files behind C-109. The PDF Meredith had supplied to Calvin looked ordinary when printed. Its electronic history was not. A design technician working for the property manager had created it 3 days after a county reviewer warned that moving the booth west would require a formal revision, proof of site control, and updated drainage review. No revised application followed. The file history recorded 2 later edits. The first shifted the booth away from the stormwater vault. The second added the note, "Field Stake Adjustment," and removed a faint parcel reference from the background layer. Neither version carried a digital county approval mark. An email chain connected those edits to the $74,000 infrastructure estimate. Susan Bell had asked the board to pause the project until title and boundary questions were resolved. Meredith replied that the approved location would destroy the budget and that management had a workable alternative. Later that afternoon, she sent the instruction to use the Caldwell side and let the revision catch up. Calvin testified under oath that his first layout followed C-104. He stopped when the utility conflict appeared and resumed only after receiving C-109. Meredith and the property manager told him access had been handled. When Jordan showed him the change order language stating that homeowner approval was pending, Calvin confirmed he had never seen a signature from me. "Would you have poured the pad if you knew Mr. Caldwell had refused permission?" Jordan asked. "No," Calvin said. The board records created another problem for Briar Glen. Meredith had authority to manage an approved project within its budget, but construction on land outside the common parcel required a board vote and documented property rights. No such vote existed. 2 directors testified that they believed the booth would remain at the C-104 location. A third said Meredith presented the relocation as a minor field adjustment that did not affect ownership. Meredith maintained that the old construction traffic and continued community use justified her decision. But the traffic logs undercut that claim. After the temporary license ended, ordinary subdivision traffic had used Briar Glen's landscaped boulevard, not my driveway. The heaviest new use began only after the booth was installed and the HOA instructed residents to approach it. Jordan also organized the damages so they could be tested instead of exaggerated. The restoration contractor separated demolition, trench repair, irrigation work, driveway gravel, grading, and landscaping. My accountant documented canceled deliveries and lost shop hours. Alicia itemized her survey charges, and the title company identified the work required to examine Briar Glen's claim. By the close of discovery, Several board members wanted the booth removed. Meredith still resisted, warning them that surrender would weaken the HOA's authority. The association's attorney requested one final opportunity to present its reliance argument at the evidentiary hearing. The night before that hearing, Jordan arranged the exhibits across his conference table. On the left lay the expired license and recorded plat. In the center sat Alicia's survey, marked with the 21-foot encroachment and 68-foot trench. On the right were C-104, C-109, the county warning, and Meredith's email. For weeks, Briar Glen had treated each document as a separate inconvenience. In the morning, the court would see them as one continuous decision. The hearing began with Briar Glen's strongest argument. Its attorney described the booth as a safety improvement serving more than 100 homes. He showed photographs of construction trucks using my driveway in 2014 and letters from residents who believed the route had always been available to the subdivision. Removing the structure, he argued, would waste association funds and delay a security project approved by the community. Jordan did not dispute the photographs. He asked what legal right allowed the association to occupy my parcel now. The HOA offered the old license and its history of use, but the document answered more than it helped. It identified the use as permissive construction access, limited it to 18 months, prohibited permanent improvements, and contained a termination date in 2016. The title report showed no later grant. Briar Glen's recorded plat placed its entrance and common property east of the drainage swale. Alicia testified next. She explained how she began with the deed calls and recorded plat, tied her measurements to the road right-of-way, and recovered the referenced iron monument beneath the river stone. Her survey did not declare who should win the lawsuit. It located the described line and the physical improvements. The booth and pad stood 21 feet inside my parcel. The trench crossed 68 feet of my land. The nearest footing was 14 feet from the road right-of-way, where C-104 required 40. The HOA's attorney suggested that landscaping work might have disturbed the recovered monument. Alicia produced the earlier survey reference, field measurements between both corners, control checks and photographs showing the aged cap undamaged beneath the stones. Moving that one pin, she explained, would not make the remaining deed distances, right-of-way control, and Western Monument agree. They all agreed. A county records supervisor authenticated the permit file. She confirmed that reviewers approved C-104 and never approved C-109. When a proposed relocation was informally discussed, county staff requested a formal revision, proof that Briar Glen controlled the new site, and updated drainage information. None was submitted. Then Calvin identified the two drawings. He described stopping work at the approved location when the stormwater vault and utilities were marked. He received C-109 after the $74,000 correction estimate was circulated. Meredith approved the western stakes in the field, and the property manager assured him that access was handled. Calvin admitted that his company should have demanded written landowner consent before pouring concrete, but he repeated that no one ever showed him my signature. Jordan played a short sequence from my cameras. It showed excavation beginning beside the orange stake, Meredith inspecting the layout, my objection that morning, the inspector posting his order, and the property manager later covering it with an HOA notice. The timestamps matched Calvin's logs and the metadata from C-109. Meredith testified that she believed Briar Glen possessed continuing access based on past use and community reliance. She said the instruction to use the Caldwell side referred to a familiar geographic area, not an admission that the parcel belonged to me. She also maintained that C-109 was an operational sketch awaiting routine approval. Jordan placed the county warning beside her email. The warning said any western relocation required proof of site control. Her email, sent afterward, instructed management to place the booth on the Caldwell side and let the revision catch up. He then showed her Susan Bell's request for a title review and the meeting minutes promising that access would be verified. Meredith could not identify a verification, a recorded right, my consent, or a board vote authorizing construction outside the common parcel. The judge did not treat the case as a referendum on whether guard booths were useful. She focused on the right Briar Glen claimed and the evidence supporting it. The association had shown temporary permissive access years earlier and a desire for a new security entrance. It had not shown a present right to place a permanent structure, utilities, guards, or a barrier on my land. The court maintained the temporary restrictions and indicated that, on the record presented, Briar Glen was unlikely to establish a right to occupy or control the surveyed area. The remaining issues, final declaratory relief, removal terms, restoration damages, and recoverable litigation costs, would proceed unless the parties resolved them. That ruling changed the board's calculations. The booth could not operate. Keeping it meant continued legal expense, while the irrigation damage and restoration obligations remained unresolved. Building at the C-104 location still required addressing the stormwater vault. 3 directors instructed the association's attorney to pursue court-ordered mediation. We met 2 weeks later. I did not ask for the $74,000 Briar Glen had hoped to avoid. That was the cost of its own infrastructure problem, not my loss. Jordan presented the documented amounts tied to my property: $21,900 for demolition and restoration, survey and title expenses, driveway and irrigation damage, verified business interruption, and a negotiated contribution toward legal costs. The HOA initially proposed leaving the concrete pad in place. Alicia and the restoration contractor explained that doing so would preserve the encroachment, interfere with grading, and leave the buried trench unresolved. I rejected it. The land had to be returned to its prior usable condition, not merely hidden beneath soil. Near the end of the second session, the parties reached written terms. Briar Glen would remove the booth, pad, barrier arm, wiring, conduit, and all trench infrastructure within 30 days through a neutral insured contractor. It would repair the irrigation branch, driveway shoulder, mailbox approach, drainage grade, gravel, grass, and affected maples under a plan reviewed by Alicia. The association would pay $42,600. The figure included restoration, survey, and title charges, documented property and business losses, and the negotiated legal cost contribution. It was not a prize or a secret windfall. Every category traced back to an invoice, estimate, or business record. Most importantly, the settlement was incorporated into a permanent consent injunction. Briar Glen and anyone acting for it were prohibited from operating a checkpoint, stationing personnel, lowering a barrier, installing improvements, or directing subdivision traffic across my parcel without a new written agreement from me. The association acknowledged that the 2014 license had expired and that no present recorded easement authorized its booth. The judge approved the agreement after both sides confirmed the terms on the record. Meredith sat behind the HOA's attorney with her hands folded over C-109. She did not look toward me when the removal deadline was entered. Outside the courthouse, Jordan asked whether I felt vindicated. I looked at the stamped order and thought about the broken orange stake still lying on my workbench. "I'll feel it when the yard is mine again," I said. 30 days had started running. The removal crew arrived on the 27th day. A neutral site supervisor checked the court-approved plan with Alicia before anyone touched the booth. The barrier arm came off first, then a small crane lifted the cedar structure from its concrete pad and carried it over the driveway that it had tried to control. Meredith was not there. 2 board members watched from Briar Glen's common land while Alicia photographed each stage. The crew cut the pad into manageable sections, loaded the broken concrete, and excavated the full 68 feet of conduit. They found the severed irrigation branch exactly where my first photographs had placed it. Restoration took another week. The contractor repaired the irrigation line, rebuilt the driveway shoulder, replaced fouled gravel, and reshaped the ground so rain moved toward the county ditch instead of pooling around my mailbox. Damaged grass was reseeded, and 2 stressed maples received new soil and watering lines. Alicia checked the final grade and installed protected reference markers near the recovered corners without changing the recorded boundary. At Alicia's request, the contractor also provided disposal receipts, electrical closeout photographs, and a signed completion report. Jordan filed the report with the court, and Briar Glen acknowledged in writing that every removal obligation had been satisfied. That paper mattered because it left no unfinished promise for a future board to reinterpret. Briar Glen directed residents back to its landscaped boulevard and kept all security operations on HOA common property. My driveway returned to what it had always been, access to my home and workshop, not a community checkpoint. The association paid the agreed $42,600 on schedule. Most of it went where the documentation said it would go, to restoration bills, survey and title expenses, business losses, and part of the legal cost. There was no dramatic fortune left over, only repaired land and a problem that could no longer return under another name. The board conducted an internal review after the settlement. Its written summary concluded that Meredith had authorized the relocation without the required vote or verified property rights. She resigned as president. Briar Glen adopted a policy requiring a current title review, certified site confirmation, and recorded board approval before any future project approached neighboring land. One morning after the last inspection, a lumber truck rolled straight to my shop. No guard stopped it. No barrier moved above the hood. The driver lowered a stack of maple plywood, signed my delivery ticket, and left the way he had come. I stood beside the mailbox after the dust settled. The porch was visible again, the driveway edge was firm, and the new grass followed the gentle grade my father and I had shaped years earlier. Nothing about the scene looked like a courtroom victory. That was why it felt complete. Back in the workshop, I took the broken orange stake from the bench. Caldwell's side was still visible beneath the dried clay. Meredith had meant those words as a convenient construction instruction. In the end, they became the simplest description of what every deed, measurement, photograph, email, and order had confirmed. I placed the stake in the file cabinet beside the expired license and closed the drawer. The HOA had arrived with concrete, a barrier, and absolute certainty. I had answered with records and patience. My driveway was mine again.